de las cosas que se le habíamos prometido desde la tribuna de Negocios TV. Y no solamente eso, sino de Negocios TV América, y era estar con un gran compañero. Lo conozco desde hace mucho tiempo, porque imagínense que cuando yo era un jovencito, él ya estaba mandando research en JP Morgan, y luego se unió a John Bay, a Mark Newton, a Carrie, y tienen esta compañía inmensa que se llama FundStrat, y ustedes me oyen cuando yo tengo mi show solo, que siempre hablo del gran Tom Lee. Tom, thank you for coming. It's an honor to have Tom. And I think the first question we might have to ask him is, should we buy at 56, 57, 57, 50 if we have any pullback in the market? Tom, do you think that we should buy the market at these levels if we have a pullback? Because today, when we're doing the interview, the market is going higher.
Yes. Look, the market's always going to have a pullback, right? It never goes straight up. But I don't think the pullbacks are going to be very deep because too many people are sitting on cash. Too many people sold the market into April, never got back in. So every time the market has a small pullback, everyone's going to be adding exposure. So I don't think pullbacks are deep.
And in your opinion, the other analysts, remember, we interview a lot of people, mostly the institutional people that actually are covering all these major hedge fund and asset managers, not only in Wall Street, but also in Latin America. They think that the earnings will play a factor role in the next potential valuation of companies. They keep saying that the S&P is overvalued at this level. They think that we might have to reach expectations if we want to keep the rally. But you mentioned that there is a lot of cash. So what should we do with all this conflicting information from big analysts, though?
Well, I think people have to do some homework. Europe, if you look at it sector by sector, in the cyclical areas is more expensive than the S&P. German technology stocks are trading at 33 times earnings. Technology stocks, excluding the Mag 7, are around 20. You're paying 50% more on a PE basis for a German tech stock. So Germany and Europe are not cheap. But more importantly, the best companies in the world are still in the US. Of the top 25 companies listed in the world in terms of market cap, 21 out of the 25 are US companies. I don't think the tariff wars or policy risk or the Fed will create 21 non-US companies to replace the US.
And do you think that based on what you mentioned, I think we always talk about your research and about your ideas, and you see that China has been up to some point overperforming as well as Europe, the US, when we were at the lows, I think a few days ago. But you're still thinking that even though the PE valuation are higher in Europe, as you mentioned it, that the whole world will go to higher? Like, even though the US will go higher, Europe might go higher, and China?
I think stocks around the world could go up because if you think about it, central banks around the world are easing, so that's good for global stocks. And tariff tensions are diminishing. And when tariff risk diminishes, that's good for all stocks.
Listen, Tom, one of the things I hear you saying for years now is that you are pretty, and I want to say it's nicely aggressive, forecasting the Bitcoin, And I think the last call we get out there is that you're overseeing a Bitcoin over 200,000. I just got a few minutes ago Mark Newton, and Mark was telling me, Victor, I think it will be 135. But I don't want to argue with Tom. Tom is always being right. What do you think about the Bitcoin, at least for the 2025?
I still think it's 250,000 this year. But it first has to make a new high first. And once we do, we have a lot of catalysts. We have the U.S. government potentially creating a Bitcoin reserve. We have a lot of pension funds that are going to be allocating to Bitcoin. There still hasn't been a lot of excitement from individual investors, but once Bitcoin makes a new all-time high, that's going to bring in new traders. So there's a lot of future demand for Bitcoin.
Listen, and I want to change the topic to, when you are managing money and you have an ETF, you have Granny, and you always are growing the AUM, and probably you're going to be one of the successful stories out there. But you have guys like friends of you, like Paul Tudor Jones or Stevie Cohen or even Jamie Dimon saying, we might revisit the lows. And obviously, if we do that, it's a buying opportunity. But do you think that we're going to go as low as 4,800 if something goes wrong in Q2 and Q3?
Well, those are all very smart people. So and then they have their reasons for thinking we're going to make new lows. That's not our base case. Our belief is that we could have pullbacks, but they're going to be very shallow because very few people are invested at the moment. And another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of companies want a crisis because that's when they grow. So a lot of companies want there to be a recession because that's their opportunity to grow. But it doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, right? But if you think about some of the companies, such as JP Morgan or the big tech companies, they take advantage of the calamities and they do acquisitions, so they benefit from a crisis. But it doesn't mean a crisis has to happen.
One of the things that we finished the interview is, Tom, when you basically were not completely able to be straightforward in your forecast, you call and say, hey, listen, we didn't see it the way it was when the Liberation Day. But how feel Tom Lee? How Tom Lee feel when you have a lot of pressure? Because, and I gotta say it because of the audience, Tom Lee is becoming the icon of the research because you've been extremely right most of the time. What happened on those days with you? You still having that conviction, or you feel kind of down that Liberation Day was a surprise for all of us?
Well, what we did was we put out a research note to explain to our clients, this tariff Liberation Day was far worse than we expected, but we also advised people not to do anything. And that was the right advice because the markets have come right back.
Eso es verdad. Él lo hizo, se lo dejé todo para que ustedes lo escucharan de Tom Lee. Si Dios quiere, lo vamos a traer más en la tribuna, a lo mejor hasta del piso de la Bolsa de Nueva York. Tom, maybe we interview one day from the floor, and he's been always, I gotta say, you've been always right. Thank you for that, okay? Thank you, guys. Nos vamos con ustedes a los estudios. Muchas gracias.